Daniel Moura never imagined that his career as a journalist would lead him to a story that would challenge his understanding of reality. It all started when he received an anonymous message, sent by an unknown sender, containing a link to an obscure article published decades ago. The article talked about a man called Victor Hale, whose appearance was identical in several photographs taken over the course of 100 years. The only possible explanation was a documentation error, but something in the tone of the article suggested that there was more behind those images. Intrigued, Daniel decided to investigate. The first clue led him to an old digital archive of a disused newspaper, where he found an interview with a woman who claimed to have known Victor. According to the account, he always appeared before major tragedies and, in some cases, tried to warn people. The problem was that nobody believed him. His presence at different times and places seemed impossible, but the consistency of the descriptions made him a mystery impossible to ignore. When Daniel began to dig deeper, he realized that he wasn't alone. His email inbox was hacked, cryptic messages started arriving, and strangers started watching him on the street. He felt he was close to discovering something big. Then, one evening, as he was leaving his newsroom, he saw a man standing in the dim light of a street lamp. It was Victor Hale, just like in the old photos. He was waiting for him. Before Daniel could react, Victor approached and, without saying a word, handed him a worn notebook. The cover was marked with strange symbols, and the pages contained a combination of dates, numbers, and predictions. When Daniel looked up, Victor had already disappeared, as if he had never been there. Back in his apartment, he flipped through the notebook, recognizing historical events recorded with frightening precision, including an impending catastrophe set to happen in a few months. The journalist felt a shiver run down his spine. It couldn't be real, but something inside him told him it was. For the first time, Daniel wondered if he was ready for the truth. And, more importantly, whether knowing the future could really change him. That night was a sleepless one. Daniel spent hours deciphering the riddles in the notebook, trying to find logic in the predictions. Between calculations and notes, he realized that the numbers formed complex mathematical patterns, aligning themselves with major historical events. His initial confusion gave way to fascination and fear. He needed help. The next morning, Daniel turned to Joanna Mendez, a renowned cryptographer and university professor. Initially skeptical, Joanna agreed to analyze the codes and quickly identified something unusual. The sequences referred to a fractal structure, indicating a pattern of repetition over time. For Daniel, this meant only one thing. Victor knew exactly what was coming. As they studied the pages, they noticed that some dates were accompanied by geographical coordinates. The first led to an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Without hesitation, they set off for the place. What they found there would change everything. Secret documents, photographs of Victor in different decades, and records of temporal experiments carried out during the Second World War. But before they could process all the information, they were surprised by an unexpected presence. Men in black suits emerged from the shadows, blocking their escape routes. What had been just an investigation had become a hunt. And now, Daniel and Joanna were at the center of it. In the midst of the chase, Daniel and Joanna ran out of the warehouse, dodging the agents. The dark, damp streets of the city served as a momentary hiding place, but they knew they weren't safe. With the documents in hand, they needed to decipher the rest of the puzzle before it was too late. The files revealed the existence of a man called Edgar, one of the last survivors of the temporal experiments. Determined to find him, they followed the coordinates that led them to an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Inside, among dusty corridors and peeling walls, Edgar was waiting for them. His mind, scarred by time and suffering, revealed the secret that would change everything. Victor had already tried to alter the future countless times, but each change seemed to lead to an even greater disaster. The idea that time corrected itself with each interference left Daniel in doubt. Were they really on the right track, or just precipitating something even worse? The clock was ticking, and the impending catastrophe was becoming more real with every passing moment. The lights in the lab flickered, and the muffled sound of the monitors filled the tense silence of the room. Daniel stared at the calculations that made no sense at all. What the scientists had discovered didn't fit with the known laws of physics. The equations distorted as he analyzed them, as if the very fabric of time was being altered. But most disconcerting of all was the fact that he felt as if he had already lived that moment. Something inside him whispered that he had already been there, made those same decisions, seen those same equations. He blinked, trying to dispel the feeling, but he couldn't. It was as if time, instead of being a straight line, was a spiral, constantly repeating itself. That's when the message was delivered. Not by a traveler from the future, but by something even more incomprehensible. A transmission from the future itself. Somehow, someone had managed to record the events that were yet to come. Not in words, but in images, sounds, and flashes of consciousness. And among the distortions, a single sentence was revealed. Time never existed. Daniel couldn't understand it. He touched the screen, trying to process what it meant. How could something so fundamental be an illusion? He turned to the other scientists, but before he could say a word, everything around him began to crumble. The laboratory, time, reality as he knew it, everything was disintegrating before his eyes. "There is no time," a voice echoed inside his mind, and he realized with a profound shock that this voice was not coming from another human being, but from the very essence of the universe. Time, as he and everyone else understood it, was nothing more than a construct, an illusion created by the human mind to make sense of infinite chaos. The feeling of déjà vu intensified, and he finally understood. It wasn't the future that was trying to infiltrate the present. It was time itself trying to break free. Those travelers, the messages, the warnings about catastrophes. It was all part of a great trap, an attempt by the universe itself to wake up. And at the heart of this awakening, what he now understood, was that there was no longer any distinction between past, present, and future. They were only temporary, momentary perceptions, which fell apart as reality reorganized itself. Suddenly, he was no longer in the laboratory. He was no longer in his own time. He wasn't even in a physical body. He found himself in front of an infinite vastness, where the perception of time didn't exist. Everything around him was constantly transforming. It was like a projection screen that was endlessly reconstructing itself. He was no longer a traveler, but a part of the flow of time itself. "You've finally understood, Daniel," said a familiar voice. He turned around, and there was Joanna, the last time traveler, or rather the first. "We don't come from the future. We come from a place beyond time. What you call the future doesn't exist. What you call the past never happened. The present is a passing idea." Daniel, now fully conscious, looked around. He saw what he could never see in his ordinary timeline. Events unfolding at the same time, simultaneously, and the choices everyone made being reflected in infinite possibilities. Every thought, every action, was a branch of an endless flow. "But if time doesn't exist, what do we have left?" asked Daniel, his voice filled with a mixture of despair and fascination. Joan's figure smiled, a smile that belonged to no era, no timeline. "What remains is what has always been before you. Freedom. The ability to realize that everything you've lived through, everything you fear and hope for, are just facets of a great illusion. The only real power lies in your choice. You can rewrite what you want, create a new future, or simply free yourself from the illusion of time." And then, without warning, everything went out. Reality as he knew it shattered, and Daniel was no longer part of a linear story. He was part of the great, vast, infinite now. There was no more destiny. There was no more room for fear or hope. He was now time itself. And time was never real. Share your opinion in the comments and tell us what you think about time travelers. If you like this story and want to explore more stories like it, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The unknown still has a lot to teach us.